On a Thursday throwback edition of Locked On Hurricanes, we get to once again rewind the clock and look back at the 1997 AHL entry draft. And more so, it's the Carolina Hurricanes' first ever draft after being relocated from Hartford. And there's one notable player that we're really going to dive into a lot more on this latest edition of the show.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making their first listen of the day. Usually 5 days a week, but since we're in off-season mode, 3 days a week. And we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I also do a Chicago Wolves column called Wolves Weekly over there as well. I'm the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun Thursday show for you guys. As like I said, we're going to go back and look at the 1997 AHL entry draft and who the Carolina Hurricanes picked in their first ever draft after they, obviously got relocated from Hartford. And there's one player in particular I really want to dive into because he kind of had the best overall career out of the 1997 draft for the Carolina Hurricanes. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that one. But before we get into anything else, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So like I said, we're going back into the 1997 AHL entry draft. And this one, I think, was very, very interesting in terms of the fact this was in Pittsburgh that year for that draft. And funny enough, the player who got taken first overall was Joe Thornton of the Boston Bruins, Patrick Marleau to the San Jose Sharks at number 2, Oleg Jokinen, number 3 to the Los Angeles Kings, Roberto Luongo, number 4 to the New York Islanders. You want to talk about a who's who of the top 4? You really can't go wrong with Thornton, Marleau, Jokinen, and Luongo. Oh, and also Sergei Samsonov, former Carolina Hurricane. Yeah, Boston Bruins is the 8th overall pick. So my goodness gracious, talk about you can't really go wrong if you're the Boston Bruins getting Thornton and Samsonov in the first. You get 2 picks in the first 8, and then you go down to number 12, Marian Hossa to the Ottawa Senators. So, I mean, all in all, not a bad kind of first run of guys to start off that draft. Now, for the Carolina Hurricanes, this was like I said, their first draft as a team. And when we look back at the 98 draft, we can see that, they kind of had some guys who had decent-ish careers overall, more so Joseph Ostachek in his 460 games and Eric Cole with his 892. But you look at the 1997 draft, not as great if you look at the overall grouping that they had. Their first pick was 22nd overall, and that was Nikos Teslos out of the Belleville Bulls, out of the OHL, a defenseman. Only played 2 games in the NHL and was a -2. Then in the second round, at the 20th overall pick, they got Brad Defoe from North Dakota, the WCHA. He only played 9 games, had 3 goals in the process. Then going to the third round, the 80th overall, they had Francis Lassard out of Vador Furs, out of the QMJHL. Sorry, my French is not very good. 115 games played, only 1 goal and 4 points. Then going on to the 4th round at 88th overall, Shane Will the Thrill Willis out of the Lethbridge Hurricanes of the WHL. 174 games played, 31 goals, 43 assists for 74 points. After that, you had to go all the way back to the 6th round at 142 to Kyle Defoe out of the Owen Sound Platers, which is now the Owenville Sound. Pick 169 in the 7th round. Andrew Merrick was a center out of Michigan at the CCHA. And then you got 2 picks in the 8th round, one at 195. That was Nicholas Nordgren out of Modo Junior Hockey, which was the Swedish Junior Hockey League. 58 games, 4 goals, 6 points. And then at 199, they got Randy Fitzgerald, was a Detroit Junior Whaler out of the OHL. And then their last pick came in at 225, and that was Kent McDonald out of the Guelph Storm of the OHL. 32 games played, 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points. So comparatively speaking to the draft next year, we had 3 guys in triple digits, and one of them, 2 of them being over 450. The 97 draft wasn't really the greatest for the Hurricanes, and it's kind of tough when you look at the draft previously. The Hartford's last draft, where they had Craig McDonald in the 4th round, played 233 games, and then they had Craig Adams, who got drafted out of Harvard, who played 951 games. And there was one other guy that played 1 game. So they only had 3 guys out of their entire draft. So the Hurricanes at the time, last year at Hartford, didn't really have a lot of – they had 3 guys playing the NHL. 2 of them played over 200 games. 1 played over 950. The next draft, yes, they did have at least 6 guys play in the NHL to some extent. Granted, 2, 9, 32, 58, and then 115. And then Shane Willis taking up the leader of the pack at 174. Overall, not a terrible draft for the Carolina Hurricanes. It's not a great when you look at the first round picks that the team had at the time, because you're looking at, Nikos Teslios out of Belleville, 1997, Jeff Harima out of the 11th overall of the Sarnia Sting. You're talking 34 combined games between 2 of those guys. Luckily, in the draft of 99, which we'll probably get to eventually here, their first round pick played 449 games. So they the following year, they kind of started picking up on trying to find that first rounder that could really work out for them. So it's one of those things where you're talking about a team overall starting the first, it's your first ever draft. 96 didn't really go well for you in Hartford. You kind of wanted to see what the team would do at that point. And it's one of those things where it's not really a draft to write home about. Like I said, you got Nicholas Nordgren, who played 58 games. Kent McDonald played 32. So those are kind of like your 2 guys there who somewhat did something as wingers, not a lot of points. The guy who played a lot of points more so, but didn't really, not so points, more so of games. 115 games and only 4 points. That was Francis Lessard out of the QMJHL. It's one of those. He got drafted by the Hurricanes NHL 2001, 2002. At the age of 22 with the Atlanta Thrashers, only played 5 games. Following season, played 18. And then in 2003, 2004, he played the most ever at 62 games. He got 2 points, 1 goal, 1 assist, and that was basically it. And then over the next 2005, 2006, only had 6 points. Played in 6 games, no points. And then he didn't get back into the NHL again until he was 31 years old in 2010, 2011 with the Ottawa Senators. Played 24 games, 0 goals and 0 assists. But here's the bad part, too. As you look at his overall average time on ice, his first season with the Atlanta Thrashers, he played 1245. After that, 540, 428, 233, and then in the 24 games of the Ottawa Senators, he averaged 3 minutes and 51 seconds. I don't know about you, but that's really tough to try to do anything in terms of making a career for yourself when you're looking at you're hardly playing like a percent of the game. You're averaging less than 4 minutes and you're playing 24 games. Yeah, that's a tough stretch to be in, especially for, a guy like Francis Lessard who, was drafted in the 3rd round and the 8th overall. But you look at the guy like Shane Willis, who got picked 8 spots after him, played 174, and it could have been a lot more. Of course, we'll get to that later in the episode. But even then, if you look at guys like Nicholas Nordgren, he came out of Modo. He did play 43 games with the Carolina Hurricanes back in the 2005-2010, but he only averaged 7 minutes and 5 seconds with the Carolina that season. 728 was with the Hurricanes, and he actually got traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins, played 15 games with them, and only averaged 5 minutes and 59 seconds. So even in the middle of a cup run, he got traded, and the Hurricanes went on to win the cup. his 4 goals and 2 assists all came in that one season in the NHL, and it was all from Carolina. In those 15 games with Pittsburgh, 0 goals, 0 points, and he was a -4. So he missed the finish with a -8 total. And that's really something it's crazy to think you had one season, and it was the season the Hurricanes won a cup, and that was kind of really about it. And the other guy, was Cam McDonald. But for his career, he didn't really crack the AHL until 2002, 2003. And that was with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He played 3 games. And then the following year, he played 29 with them at the age of 24. 3 points in 29 games, and he averaged 10 minutes and 18 seconds. So overall, if you look at how that draft was for the Hurricanes, not the greatest outside of Shane Willis, who we're going to talk about for most of the episode, because rightfully so, it's Shane Willis. But it's a kind of a tough thing when you look at that draft. I know it's your first one. You try your best to make it work, but it's one of those things where you look at the 98 draft and go, okay, you kind of had some hits with at least 2 of those guys. But looking at the 97 draft, Nicholas Nordgren got most of his points. He got all of his points with you. Didn't really play a lot after that from the one season. Cam McDonald didn't really do a whole lot. He didn't play with the Blue Jackets. Brad DeFaul only played 9 games. And then, your first 2 picks, Nikos and Brad, combined for 11 games and 3 points. And that was really about it. Even Francis Lessard didn't really do anything for the Hurricanes. And even then, he played a lot of games, but didn't really have any minutes. So nothing else you can really say about that. But we are going to talk about Shane Willis, like I said, for the majority of the episode, because he is the most notable draftee out of this entire 97 draft, and rightfully so, because I've said it on the Surgecast, and I'll start saying it here. I think for me, he is the Carolina Hurricanes' biggest what-if player, in my opinion. I'll explain why here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. All right, guys, we got to talk about Game Time. And Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices in the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, reduced from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. What I like about the Game Time app, like I said, their last-minute tickets are really, really great in terms of looking for great deals. And when talking about the deals, they got some really great flash and zone deals that might help you save even more money when it comes to buying seats. And when it comes to buying seats, they get a great viewfinder so you can see where you're looking at the venue before you even buy the tickets itself. And going back to the deals, the last minute deals are great because you actually save up to 60% off when buying last minute tickets for not just sports, but for concerts, comedy theaters, and so much more. With their flash deals, you could save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And if you want to save even more, their zone deals are even great because this is where you get to choose the section, but you let the Game Time app choose the seat for you. And with their seats, this is something that I really like. It's their panoramic viewfinder from your seat locator because you can actually check out your seat in the app before you buy. So that way you don't have to worry about bad angles, obstructive views, all that stuff. That is completely erased with this panoramic viewfinder in the app itself. Because when doing that, you're actually taking the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. So make sure to go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 1, we're going to be talking about Shane Willis and why I believe he's probably the biggest what-if for the Carolina Hurricanes. And that's because of the fact that you look at how he was in his career, which unfortunately cut very short by a lot of concussion injuries, and one specifically from Scott Stevens of the New Jersey Devils, was pretty much kind of threw Willis out of his game. And I think where Shane could have been a really great hockey player, all things considered, because when you look at how he was overall, yes, he was drafted 88th overall by the Carolina Hurricanes out of Lethbridge, but how he was as a player, though, it's kind of surprising for the fact that I think he was someone who really could have thrived a lot more. And I think if you put him in today's NHL, or even like 2004, 2005, like the 05, 06 season, I think he really would have taken off. I think he is kind of someone who kind of started in the NHL I think he kind of started a little early in the NHL. I think if you give him a few more extra years, I think he could have put himself in a spot where he would have thrived. I think Shane Willis would have thrived in today's game. And just because of where he's at, when he came into the league, I think he would have thrived more in what the 05, 06 Hurricanes would have been if you give him a little bit of extra time of just coming around then. Because looking at his overall career, even looking back at the Red Deer Chiefs, you're talking like the U15 AAA team, 60 points in 29 games in 92-93. Following year, 66 in 34 games. You look at the Prince Albert Raiders of the WHL, 81 points in 69 games in his second season in the WHL. In the playoffs, 21 points in 18 games. He was just unreal for them. And then he goes over to Lethbridge. His last year of junior, looking at 64 games, 58 goals, 54 assists for 112 points. In the playoffs, 5 points in 4 games. Fast forward, he's with he gets drafted by the Carolina Hurricanes. He goes to the Beast of New Haven in the AHL, Cincinnati Cyclones for a little bit in the 1999-2000 season. 60 points in 80 games, 35 goals, 25 assists. In the playoffs, 8 points in 11 games. 2000-2001, he gets 44 points in 73 games. I mean, that's 20 goals, 24 assists. And probably his first full season with the Carolina Hurricanes. And then 2001-2002, it was his last year in Carolina, played 59 games, had 17 points before going to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Even then, even in Springfield, 2002-2003, 32 points in 56 games. 03-04, 48 points in 55 games for the Hershey Bears. 27 goals. Later down the road, Albany River Rats, 43 points in 43 games of the AHL, 20 goals. So even later on in his career, when you actually do get into the going into the post lockout, he was still putting points up, but by then, yeah, it's a completely different league and where he was at in his career, where you're looking at back in 2000, 2001, where he put up 44 points. If you put him where he was at his scoring touch before the injuries and all that stuff, and then before he went over to Switzerland, played for Davos, and then Lycoping in the SHL. Even when he was with the Springfield Falcons, he was the captain of that team. He still had 34 points. And for me, it's one of those things where in 5 seasons in the NHL, he played 174 games, had 74 points, but a lot of that was with the Hurricanes. 141 games, 27 goals, 34 assists for 61 points. He did average 13 minutes and 53 seconds. That 2000-2001 season, he actually finished 5th in the Calder votes. And, that's still pretty good. But, of course, when you look at that draft class, just look at that 2000-2001 rookie class overall, it's crazy the thing where you look at how the Calder was and that you try to see that you're talking of Gain to Bakov, played unreal, 219 goals against average and 915 save percentage. He was 32-21-7 on a very not so great Sharks team. Brad Richards, Martin Havlat. Still finishing 5th is still pretty good. He finished higher than Marian Gaborik and Daniel Sedin and Roberto Luongo and Marty Turco. So he did finish above a lot of good guys in that Calder class for 2000-2001. Like I said, if it wasn't for all the concussions early on, especially from the Scott Stevens hit, I think Shane Willis would have been really, really good. Like I said, 44 points in 73 games in his first full AHL season. 11 even strength, 9 power play goals, 6 game winners. And then he was averaging 15 minutes and 58 seconds. And then, of course, everything else kind of just sidestepped his career a little bit. But overall, I mean, you really can't say that Shane Willis doesn't deserve to be the what-if Hurricane. Because, like I said, I read you his stats from when he was in junior, even going all the way back to his early days, going from the Red Deer Chiefs in the AMHL to Prince Albert in the WHL. Then he goes over to Lethbridge, still kills it over there. Goes to the Beast of New Haven in the AHL, puts up 81 points in 73 games in 98-99. Kills it with the Cincinnati Cyclones in the IHL, 60 points in 80 games. Even going to Carolina, even after that too, even the 1 year he played with the Hershey Bears, he was still putting up points. It's just, I think where he was, and like I said, if you put him, if he came a little bit later on to where the NHL kind of changed its guard of how they wanted to play the game, I think Shane Willis would have thrived in the salary cap era of the NHL rather than where it was at that time when he came in, when it was still the clutch and grab, still a lot of the 90s hockey, whereas a lot of you try to hold on to guys, the two-line pass was still there. There was no trapezoid. Really couldn't touch the blue paint. It wasn't a lot of offense. That's why you saw a lot of low-scoring games, a lot of trap defenses, stuff that made the New Jersey Devils really good, even the Colorado Avalanche and stuff like that. So if you put Willis in a more offensive, thriving league that the NHL was after the post-lockout of 04-05, you could have seen him be one of those guys where he could have actually been a household name around the NHL and probably could have been a star player if it wasn't for the fact that he came in kind of in the wrong generation of hockey at that time, and especially with the fact that he got absolutely taken out by Scott Stevens. But it's just one of those things where I think if you put him in the right era of what his skill set was, I think he would have done a lot more. And so we're going to talk about more of why I think that would have been more prevalent for Shane Willis and why he probably would have had a better career if for the fact he was placed in the right generation, and which I'll do that here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. It's like I said at the end of segment 2, just kind of talking a little bit more about Shane Willis and why I think that you look at his career overall, going back to juniors, he was a known scorer. It's a foregone conclusion that this guy could put up points. Goals wise, he was a really great playmaker, good two-way forward, someone who really was able to use his speed, use his talents, and it showed on the score sheet wherever he went. And going to play in the AHL, going to play in the international, the IHL, goes and plays an almost full season with the Hurricanes and does a pretty good job of doing it too. And it's just with unfortunate head injuries and just kind of where his career went, it could have been a lot more if it wasn't for the concussions. Even then, even after leaving Carolina, did play with the Tampa Bay Lightning for, a couple seasons. He scored points when he was able to. He had a really great AHL career, all things considered, with the Springfield Falcons for a couple seasons, even with the Hershey Bears, went over to Europe, played pretty decently with HC Davos in the Swiss League, got 20 points, comes back, he was a points per game guy for the Albany River Rats in 06-07, and even had 4 points in the playoffs. His last year playing hockey in 2008-2009, played one game in the ECHL with the Whaling Nailers, got a 1 point in one game, and then goes to play at Springfield one more time, and he has 14 points in 32 games. So, like I said, everywhere that Shane Willis has gone, he's more than proven himself as that guy. And that's why if you're looking at the 1997 AHL entry draft, Shane Willis is the most notable draftee because of the fact that, yes, he only played in 174 AHL games, but he played 141 of them with the Hurricanes. Yes, it was only 61 points, but it was still a productive 61 points, especially look at that one season where he finished 5th in the Calder, high above a lot of guys. And he was, someone who was part of the 2000-2001 AHL All-Rookie team, which, it's not a lot of people take that, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I mean, that's still really good. The fact he made an all-rookie team for the production that he did, where he put up 44 points in 73 games in the 2000 season, which, like I said, yeah, you're in the new, century, but you're still talking 90s style of hockey. So to be part of an AHL rookie team is still pretty good for the fact of how young he was too, 23 at the time. And if it wasn't for Scott Stevens and all those head injuries, I think he probably would have had a longer career, especially in the AHL, even with the Carolina Hurricanes, because being able to be an 88th overall pick, he went and did what he did for the most part, and then just injuries kind of sidelined him. But even then, going to the AHL, going to Europe and coming back, he still was productive. It's just, like I said, it's one of those things where it wasn't for injuries, and I think if you put him in the proper generation of where his skill set was, he probably would have had a longer career, probably would have been a guy who would have been a star in the league. And it's just because of being drafted in 1997, basically played in the league in the 2000s, and we're talking early 2000s, still clutch and grab. That was a completely different style of hockey, where there was no salary cap, two-lane passes were still a thing, trapezoids and stuff like that, like I mentioned before. But now you go into what we are in now, even 05, 06, you take the two-lane pass out, now you got the trapezoid, now you have a more offensive style game, and Shane Willis was a more offensive style guy, and if that skill set for him was in this new era of the salary cap era, yeah, I think you're looking at a guy who probably could have had closer to 400, 500 points. I believe so. I mean, who really knows? Because it's just one of those things we'll really never know. But I firmly believe that if you give him a chance in a league with his skill set, where he was just like a Paul Kariya, a guy who was really good with his skill set. I mean, we all know how good Paul Kariya is. But even then, like if you put him in this era, I think he would have thrived in this type of league where, he gets absolutely smoked by Scott Stevens once again in the 03 Cup. But if you look at that and just those two guys right there, put them in a more offensive league at their time of what their skill set was, yeah, I think career-wise it would have been vastly, even more so. Like I said, Paul Kariya is already great. We all know that. Put him in this era, oh my goodness, he would have went off. And that's how I feel about Shane Willis, and just because of what he's done. So I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Shane Willis would have thrived more if he was in this type of era rather than kind of entering when he did in the early 2000s, when it was still kind of the when it came to the salary cap and all the rules changes with the two-line passes, more offensive flow and type stuff like that. And it's just, yeah. What do you think? Do you think he would have had a better chance if his skill set was more in today's hockey rather than, or even like the late 2000s instead of like 2000 to 2004? So I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. But that will wrap up the Thursday episode of Locked On Hurricanes. I hope everyone enjoyed the show. If you want to keep up with me, you can follow me at OneSureZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. If you click the link tree in my bio, you can find out where to read all my articles at the Hockey Writers, along with my other podcasts. You can check out where to listen and watch the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For this podcast, you'll find a link to where to listen to the podcast on all platforms. If you leave a 5-star rating and review, I might just read it on the show. And if you go check out the YouTube side of things, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know if you like the episode as well. Also, to share it with all other Caniacs as well, so they become everydayers just like you. Because we are over 930 subscribers. We are 70 away from 1,000. And if we get to 1,000, I might just do something special for you guys. But like I said, I hope everyone enjoyed the Thursday episode. I'm hoping everyone's really liking these draft class episodes. If you do like them, let me know in the comments. That way we can keep doing more of these as the offseason goes along. And I really like doing them. So it's kind of fun to kind of look back and just see where certain guys got picked by the Hurricanes throughout their history of the draft. So let me know what you think about that. Hope everyone's a good rest of their Thursday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.